Hi there, and welcome to another episode from the Anarchist Beauties podcast. I am Luna, and this is Minxie. This is episode number 3, and today we are talking about Oh Canada.
All right, welcome everyone. Super glad I'm on this episode today. Unfortunately, I wish there would be more of us, but I will try to educate you guys as much as I possibly can here today. So, one of the biggest things that people don't understand is what Canada's political system is. So, Canada's political system is a blend of parliamentary democracy and constitutional monarchy. Now, I know that's really confusing for some people about what that means, and I'll explain it a little bit. So, we have what is called a Governor General. So, the Governor General is appointed by our Prime Minister, but given the okay by the monarchy. And essentially, our Governor General approves all of our bills. So after they pass through Parliament, she has to give her stamp of approval before any bills are made law, which I specifically bring that up today because of the bill that I'm going to be talking about. Now, the bill that I particularly wanted to discuss today was Bill C-11. And the person who passes all our bills and stuff like that, she actually, our Governor General, she used to be a broadcaster for the CBC. Now, for those of you who don't know, the CBC is Canadian Broadcasting Television, which is very heavily controlled by the government and what their narrative is and what they want shown and such. As much as people like to disagree with that, but let's face it, they're pretty pro-Trudeau during this whole time, even when strikes have been going on with this CRA and everything like that. They really don't support the common people in most of their broadcasting. So I just figured I was going to make a point of that first before I really dive into this, because I feel like it's a super important part of why this bill got passed. So
I just want to add too that I'm in New York, so we're very close to the border. But even being this close to the border, like a lot of our media, you can definitely see that where they are very pro Trudeau. We saw
absolutely.
it huge with the truckers. Like when all that protesting was going on, they covered it very vaguely and barely touched on it. So yeah, definitely you can see that with the media.
The funny part I found with all that is that they were really only showing what was going on in the East and not in the West. Like here in the West, like I live in Alberta. So Alberta is considered part of Western Canada, and our views are heavily varied comparatively to the East. So while that whole trucker protest was going on, a lot of people in the West actively supported it, but you weren't finding really people in the East were, for obvious reasons, because, well, that would mean that they would actually have to, start supporting our country in other ways than just, being the headquarters for Trudeau. Because let's face it, Quebec doesn't really give much in terms to what other provinces do in Canada, So yeah, I'm going to explain a little bit about our parliament, because that is also something that people don't really understand. So we are similar to the States, but we're much more similar to how British politics are run. Okay, so our parliament has 2 branches. The first is executive. You have the Crown, or the Governor General. You have the Prime Minister, who actually chooses the Governor General, which I always thought was super ironic, because I'm like, the Governor General is the one that approves approves all of our laws, and is also the figurehead for the Queen, so as it is. So it's ironic that our Prime Minister is allowed to pick the person who passes all of our bills. Like, that never really made sense to me.
Yeah, doesn't really make much sense at all.
Yeah, so the monarch is very much a figurehead in Canada, in a sense, but we have actually special privileges that are granted to them, right? So our current Governor General is actually Mary Simon, and like I said, she is a ex-CBC broadcaster, but she's also the first Indigenous woman or first Indigenous person ever actually to make cabinet or to hold office in Canada at all. So as much as we are very much advanced in the ways for like women in politics, we very much cherry pick who we put in. That is for sure.
Yeah, it sounds very much so like let's throw the dogs a bone to keep the peace.
Yeah, I think that's very much what our government does. They throw us just enough to, blind us, side us, but do all this shit behind our back that we don't really know of unless you actually look into it. Yeah. So,
right.
So, yeah, the other thing that our Governor General is allowed to do as well is appoint ministers. But that is also done on the advice of our Prime Minister. So again, both are in sync to who gets applied where. Very, very shady. All right. So I was gonna actually go into like our territories and stuff like that and how many seats and stuff, but I feel like you guys would probably get like super bored about that. And so I'm just gonna dive into Bill C-11. Okay. So Bill C-11 is known as the Digital Charter Implementation Act, which was actually created to force countries to contribute or force force companies to help contribute and promote Canadian content, which on its surface sounds great, but I actually dug a little bit deeper into what this means. All right. So this bill was created so that they can enact 2 other bills within this bill. Something that a lot of people don't actually realize in Canada, that in our fine print, in our bills, yes, a bill can look very good on its surface, but unless you're reading the fine print, you don't actually know what these bills are doing. Okay. So, and that also actually gave them the ability to amend other acts as well in this process, if they deem it so related. Okay. So the other one is the Personal Information and Tribunal Act, which actually I found was the much bigger bill. And I think the greater fish that they were after to get in, just because of like what this does for us. Okay. So the Consumer Privacy Act, which allowed for the Personal Information and Data Protection Tribunal. Now, this is controlled by the Privacy Commissioner General, which again is also appointed by our highest authority, the Crown, right? So these powers include the authority to compel the production of records and enter private places. So it essentially gives our government the permission to enter into businesses and corporations with no warrant and free roam to dig out whatever records that they want. And that includes our personal information, which is something that a lot of people don't realize, right? Because these companies data mine. Facebook data mines. All of our advertising, all of that we see is particularly groomed for us and our likes and what we follow and everything. So this is very important, imperative information that
privacy matters.
Yeah, privacy definitely matters. And this is essentially the elimination of our own privacy as well, which they state that it's not, but it absolutely is. Because when these records now suddenly become available and free for the government, they can do whatever they want with that. Now, the other thing that this bill also includes is that it would allow the Privacy Commissioner to share this information with other federal agencies. So you have a warrant? Guess what? If you've been active on Facebook, the Privacy Commissioner can let the cops know. They can even track you down to your very location of where you are, obviously, because that is how that works, right? If you post anywhere, your Facebook can directly determined where exactly you are posting from. Something that a lot of people kind of forget, actually, or don't realize. Our privacy isn't that private as much as we like to think that it is. Okay. This also allows our government to sell our information to other foreign entities, to other foreign governments. So all of our information can be sold to China if our government so chooses to. So this is a huge breach of our personal information and our personal privacy on the internet across the board. And the ironic part is people don't know this. No one actually knows this is because it's undercover under the Bill C-11. And unless you actually sit there and read the bill like I did, and I did, I took like days out reading this bill, and I will say it sucked. It horribly sucked. But once I dug this little like tidbit out, I really like went down the rabbit hole and read a lot about this bill, and yeah, goodbye internet privacy that no longer exists in Canada as it sits.
This actually sounds really familiar to, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but our TikTok bill. I'm actually looking it up right now to see if I can find it. But it was also a lot of basically the same thing. It sounded good on top, but then when you delved into it, it was total elimination
really bad
of anything. Anything to do with your privacy.
But it makes sense though, right? Because what Canada does and what the States does, they sort of like wave together on some level. Like if we pass a bill, the States tries to do the same, right? Just because we are so close together and our information is, our platforms are international. We have platforms in the States, we have platforms in Canada, all of our, it's all pretty much on the same board now.
I think the only one who's kind of doing their own thing now is Mexico at this point.
Yeah.
Canada and the United States seem to be best buds.
Oh yeah, especially when it comes to information sharing, that's for sure. Now, the thing that I need to make clear is that Bill C-11 doesn't actually define what Canadian content is. Okay. Now they actually leave that with the CRTC. Now the CRTC is actually all of our media. They define, control, rate, everything. So anything that is Canadian content, whether it is internet, Facebook, or like digital TV, radio, all of that goes through them. So they actually define what they consider Canadian content. And they follow what is called the MAPL system or the MAPL system. And so there's various rules. And honestly, it was like kind of a lot. It's worth looking up yourself. Honestly, if you really want to know what they define as Canadian content, it is on their website. They do have it in type, what they define as Canadian content. So yeah. So before this bill came about, our broadcasting rules didn't apply to a lot of the major companies like Disney, Netflix, Spotify, all those. So Canada has a certain set of broadcasting rules. Like if we film here, you have to hire a certain percentage of Canadian actors, all that kind of stuff. Like you have to meet these standards if you are Canadian filming within Canada. But outside broadcasting, outside filmmakers and stuff who come into Canada, and it is very common, like people don't actually realize how much of your films are actually filmed in Canada. It is actually like The Reverend is a big one that was filmed in Canada. A lot of those old Western movies are filmed in Canada. We don't, particularly here in Alberta, where I live. We actually have a lot of areas that don't have telephone poles, that are very, very, very empty, void of any sort of technological sighting for miles. So that's why a lot of the filming happens here. And plus, too, there's also kickbacks as well. Something else that a lot of people don't realize, a lot of people film in Canada because they do get tax rebates when they film here.
Of course they would. Got to give them a little incentive.
Yeah, and so basically, is like Bill C-11 itself was just a giant money grab. Like, it's the government trying to pull a big money grab from all of these big companies. And I think, unfortunately, what that's going to do is we're going to see a lot less filming go on here, for one. Like, what series was it? The zombie series, All of Us, I think it was. There's a scene that was actually filmed here in Lethbridge, Alberta. The bridge in the back, that is the Lethbridge Bridge. I see it every day going to work and stuff. So, you know, I think what that's going to do, it's going to create this vacuum of where we're going to see all these big Hollywood companies take their money elsewhere, basically. Because when you start enforcing acts like, oh, you have to hire a certain amount of Canadian actors, so I get why. I honestly, on the one hand, you know, you're coming here, you're taking up our space, you're, you know, invading our, you know, you're using our economy. It should be, you know, you should try to like hire on locals if you can. That is fair, right? At least in a person's rational mind. That is fair. But people forget corporations don't run like that. They run on the almighty dollar. And if it's going to cost them more to come here and film, they're going to stop coming here. And unfortunately, Canadians don't realize how much of the filming industry is vital to our economy. Like, our oil sands, we don't own them. Canada doesn't own a lot of our own natural resources. The filming industry, the media industry is one of the few industries that we have that not only showcases like the natural beauty of Canada, and let's face it, we do have a lot of it. Like, we have beautiful places here, but it also affects our economy long term. So those places like Fort Macleod, all those locations that are small rural cities who don't have a lot of money coming in, who, you know, get a huge burst of financial push from those films coming into film, because they're paying for restaurants, they're paying for hotels, cars, flights, all that stuff, film equipment, all of that stuff. That comes from us. So to take and to say, hey, we're going to set you up to the same standard, not horrible idea, but I think long-term horrible for corporations because they just do not run that way. And we both know that. Everyone knows that, you know.
Yeah, that's like everything in the United States is either exported from China or Mexico.
Yeah.
There's like nothing made in the United States anymore.
No. And the funny part about this all is not, when you look at the actual votes, like I took a look at how Bill C-11 went through Parliament, and not a single conservative soul, not a single one voted on this bill. And it was all NDP and Liberals. Obviously, because the NDP and Liberals are in bed with each other, because right now, I don't know if you guys understand what the difference is between a majority and minority government. Now, a minority government here in Canada means that the government or the prime minister in power has to peddle to the other cabinet members to get the votes to get bills passed, because they don't have the majority of the votes to say, hey, fuck what you guys say, we're going to pass it anyway because we have the majority, right? So obviously it's a different playing ground when you have to peddle. So the Liberals and the NDP have been in bed for ages. We all know this. It was actually, I found it really, really interesting to see like that the Green Party actually partnered up with the Conservatives on this vote. There was only one Green Party seat. Only one, because obviously the Green Party does not get a lot of the votes. Like, we don't really have, and honestly, there's not much need of it anymore. Weed's been legalized. Green Party is, you know, they have to find other direction, but they still have one seat. And they actually got in line with the Conservatives on that vote. So I found that, I actually kind of chuckled when I read that. I was like, ha. And then, of course, the Bloc Québécois, but who gives a fuck what they think? They're Quebec. They can separate for all I care. But yeah, so that was, it's definitely interesting to see that this bill is hiding so many of these other acts in them. And like, people don't realize, like, the Tribunal Act itself, like the Tribunal Act can enforce fines on companies for not giving up information. So say, for example, they go into Facebook and they're like, hey, we want all of your information on how people view things, like how they view their, anything that they can ask for.
Mm-hmm.
If Facebook does not agree, they will face fines. So that could mean companies like TikTok could lose, like they could actually leave Canada. Like these companies could actually do that.
Mm-hmm.
With this bill. That is like a side effect that could happen. Will they? Probably not. Let's face it. TikTok, Facebook, all those companies, they love data mining. They love advertising. They love making money. They're going to stay
They
where the
always
money.
cater to the government anyway, so.
Yeah. And big corporations always cater to the governments because they're basically in their pockets anyway. But like I said, this comes back to our Governor General, and I found it hilarious that she was an ex-CBC broadcaster and approving a bill that literally gives the CBC and the government full reign of all Canadian media now. And they can determine what we view or what we don't view at that. People think, oh, well, data mining, all that kind of stuff, they're going to, but they can also restrict what we view too. So that means CBC News, all those news stations. Well, if you're airing something that our government doesn't want us to know, you're suddenly now not allowed to air in Canada or you face fines. So people don't understand that this is also a restriction of information. And as anarchists, we all know restriction of information is a bad thing. Not being informed is a bad thing. That's how you get compliant zombies. So I don't see this ending very well for Canada. Yeah, it's just
crazy, everything that they hide right in plain sight. And so many people just...
Well, and this all comes in right after they put a ban. Like, I don't know if people know, but Trudeau has now made it illegal. We are no longer allowed to buy, sell, trade, inherit, import handguns. There has been a ban on handguns. What you have is what you have. You are no longer allowed to sell. And it's his way of putting a complete stop and trying to do the big gun buyback, pushback again that he's been doing every single year. So
I saw it mentioned. I didn't know that it had passed yet, but
it did. It absolutely has passed.
I know here in
very, very disgusting that passed.
Here in the States, they've been doing a lot of. I would say it's strange, but it's really not, because we know how the media works and how propaganda works. But there have been articles from all over the place about these really just strange happenings of people getting shot and killed. For example, there was a young lady who showed up at the wrong address in an Uber, and the guy shot her and killed her.
Yeah. I just heard about that story.
Yeah. And then there was another one that these two cheerleaders were accidentally in someone's yard, and he shot and got shot. Them. Yeah. And it's like,
and it's always funny. They always
happen, but this is a little too convenient, little too, there's something off here.
But they always do that, like right before they're going to do something like a gun buyback program or trying to make certain guns illegal or whatever. They always push the big propaganda first. So you'll see the news stories, you'll see the articles come out, like right before ours happened, there was a big bust where this guy got busted for 3D printing gun parts, like thousands of them. And I'm like, the irony of that story even getting released at that should have said, hey, this program is not going to fucking work.
Yeah.
People don't give a fuck. We're going to keep that shit anyway. And we're going to do it in alternative means, like 3D printing.
You can't ban the black market. The black market will always exist. And
it gets smarter too. And this is this is what people forget. The black market evolves.
Yeah.
So for everything that they change, it gets wiser, changes, alters its way to work its way around that.
Absolutely.
This is the way that it's always been.
Yep. And anyone who says, oh, yes, you can't. No, you can't. Look at maximum security prisons. That's a perfect example. You still get drugs. You still get weapons. You still get contraband. You still get all of that in a maximum security prison. It's like, you think that you're going to do this in, general civilization even. You know, we don't even have the walls and the barbed wire. And I would say we don't have security guards, but we do. We do. We have corrections officers everywhere and cameras. But yeah, no, it blows my mind that people think that banning something is the solution, and it's really not. They're just making things more dangerous. That's all
but
they're
like
doing.
if you want a good education, spend some time in jail, man. Like spend some time in jail. You get like a wicked education there on how to like make shit and do shit without, you know, being sneaky about it. It's crazy. I've like some of the shit I've seen like, come out of jail.
For ramen noodles.
Oh yeah. Some of the shit I've seen come out of there is crazy.
Yeah.
I have a friend who like did a whole bunch of time, and he came out wealthier. Like he came out richer than he did going in because
I believe it.
He got a hustle going on in there, and then like, yeah, it was crazy. I'm like, I'm actually not surprised though. So, but yeah. So yeah, all of this is just like super, super convenient timing, I found, you know, and people don't realize our Governor General is appointed by the Prime Minister, who is also okayed by, well, at the time was the Queen. Now our next one will be King Charles or whatever. Like everyone gives a fuck.
Fingers.
Yeah. But so it's hard to like argue that they're not all in bed together.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
they definitely
on
are.
some level that like, I just, if people need to actually really sit down and like read these bills, because I know a lot of actors and stuff are like super stoked about this bill C11 being pushed, but I don't think they realize the other parts of this bill that is open as well. And I just hope that the CBC doesn't take a full monopoly on our media. I think that would be a horrible thing. That's China level shit right there. You know, government controlled media. And I just think it's funny too that Trudeau has very much a way of like making cherry coating shit, right? Oh, I got a CBC broadcaster, but she's the first Indigenous female. You know?
Back to what I said about throwing a bone.
Yeah. So it's like you want to say something, but on the other hand, if you do, you look like a giant asshole for saying something, right?
Yeah.
Like he sets himself up to do that. And I just like, it's very baffling. And see here, our prime ministers, like we don't have term limits for our prime ministers. Like they can be in power, like they can be prime minister for as long as they are voted in. Trudeau's on his third term right now. I'm hoping with the next election he gets voted out, but as it sits, the Conservative Party still doesn't really have a base. And I don't think the NDP will get voted in because provincially they never do well. Like the NDP was, like they did win in Alberta once and only once, and it went horrible and people hated them and they got shit on so hard after. Like the NDP, they're a good like they sound good in theory. They have good ideas. They're about the people. I support that and stuff. But in practice, in practicality, when they have control, it does not end well. They bankrupt, like they just about bankrupt us, like our province alone. And so people will never trust them on a federal level. Like that just won't happen. And yeah. So we're basically a two-party system like you guys are. We have liberals or conservatives because any other party is not even really on the board. Like, it's good to see that we have libertarians, starting to run. I will say that's starting to become a thing, but not, not really. It won't be in my era that I see a libertarian prime minister.
Yeah, it's funny. Me and my other half were just having this discussion yesterday in the car, talking about how, yes, we're anarchists, but we also recognize that being realistic, we will never see anarchism in our lifetime. Yes. Our children will probably never see it either, and neither will our grandchildren, but we can start the change.
Start the seeds, right? Yeah. And actually, that's one of the biggest things that, like, I get shit on there, like, oh, well, you live in Canada, you have it good, but, why are you an anarchist? You can live in a gilded cage, and a gilded cage is still a cage, right? Like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree. I will never, as much as I wish, I would love to see anarchy come into a full spectrum, you know, across the board in this world. It's not something I will see in my lifetime. I think we have far too many people who are comfortable in the system. They rely on the system. They're too passive and are not, like, there's so many psychological studies out there that show how easy it is for us to be brainwashed and for us to become passive and for us to be led in a certain direction. Like, there's tons of research out there on that.
Absolutely. And I think honestly, if governments and everything were to disappear tomorrow, and I'm always a big one, there's order out of chaos, but
Yeah,
so many people would lose their minds because
yeah.
they would not know what to do. They're not ready for that level of responsibility and accountability.
Most people aren't.
Yeah.
I would say most people are not. Like, let's be real, most people can't put the mirror up to themselves and evaluate themselves on a realistic level and say, hey, here's what my flaws are. Here's what I need to work on to be a better person. Let alone
Absolutely.
be that so much into forethought that they can say, hey, I'm capable of being responsible for myself. And you know
Mandy
what?
mentioned in her introduction video that she felt that one of the big things in the anarchist movement that she's seen happening that she's actually really proud about is all of the healing, all of the trauma healing. And I definitely agree with her on that aspect. Like I said, things are definitely in motion. There's a lot of people waking up in the world, and there's a lot of people going, hey, something's wrong. This is not adding up anymore. And I love it. I love it for them. And I love that this transition is happening. But for the most part, I just want to have my cabin out in the middle of nowhere and leave me alone.
Same. Definitely the same here. And people don't realize too that when you're dealing with trauma and when you're actually healing that trauma, that you have to do the light work that's behind it. And that means dealing with the darker parts as well.
Absolutely.
And
a lot of that comes back to accountability and responsibility.
Yeah. And can you truly be a person of accountability and responsibility for yourself? And not only that, for your community too. Because let's face it, there are people out there who, who can't, who just physically can't, who are, who are stuck in a wheelchair for life or whatever. Those are going to be the people who need us to be able to be truly accountable for ourselves, to make our world better, to help those who can't help themselves.
Yeah. And I think this would be a good little spot to drop a hint for one of our upcoming episodes for next month, is that we are going to be bringing some voluntarist charities, some speakers on to talk about how these voluntarists are making changes in their community and how they're helping others. And they're doing all of this through voluntarism and through choice to show it can be done.
Yeah. I think that's an amazing thing, I think, especially when you see like these horrible bills being passed and all this horrible stuff going on the top levels of our government, that it doesn't jade us peons on the very bottom from trying to make the world as best as we can. Because, like, let's face it, this stuff it's not going away.
Yeah, no,
it's not going away anytime soon, because it takes too many people to wake up for that to go away. And it's just
agree with you.
Yeah. I really, really hope that people start reading, and especially people read the bills before you say okay, before you say something is good or just or whatever. Fully understand what you're saying okay to.
Yeah.
These bills are not
at face value. Read it.
Yeah, actually read it. These bills are not just a brief gloss over. You really have to read into this stuff. Because yes, it can look great on surface level, but the fact that this enables 2 other bills which detrimentally affect business in Canada, and not only that, our own privacy, is a huge issue under the guise of something that is supposed to benefit our economy. Which rightfully so, yes, Canada should, we should take pride on the fact that we, have some of the best filmmakers, some of the best actors, some of the best, creative minds in the world. that come from Canada. And we should, make the best of that. But not on the backs of other people's privacy being eliminated.
Correct.
Or on the backs of other people's freedoms. That should not be the case.
I don't think people realize, too, when you sign away this level of privacy, you don't get it back.
No. And people, like, how many of us sit there and read Facebook's terms of service, right? I certainly didn't. I don't have that much mental capability in my life. But yeah, when you actually read the fine print on a lot of this stuff, like, people don't actually realize what they're signing up for. And that's why I tell people, like, when I grew up, internet safety was completely different. Like, you didn't put your location. You didn't, tell people your phone number. You didn't give people your address. You didn't do any of that. And now people just willy-nilly put all of everything out there, and then they wonder why.
We're just all besties.
Hell, you'll never see me post my, like, house or anything. Like, you'll never know. Like, you can get glimmers of get an idea of where I maybe live. Mm-hmm. But unless you know me, you don't know where I live. You just know I live in Old Lethbridge somewhere.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you with that. That's something that me and my other half also talk about a lot is OPSEC. And that's, just trying to protect your privacy while online. I am very open, but I am also very, there's a lot of things that I do keep private. Like, you see my personal Facebook wall. Yeah. I post literally everything. Like, nobody would know what's actually going on with my life because I'm all over the place. But definitely, there are some things that you should be taking precautions with. And the further that this stuff progresses, especially with AI, there's a lot of concern with that also. And also with deepfakes, like, they're able to take people's images and put them on,
on anything.
Anything. So, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and honestly, that's a huge issue that I find with privacy right now. Like, there is no repercussions for that stuff. Like, it particularly, in a lot of industries, like, about how many women's faces are posted on, like, porn star bodies and posted online or, like, made into videos and stuff. And while the videos are 100% fake, all it took was a little bit of digital work, and now there's a whole porno video, and they think it's this poor girl.
Yeah, and that
cyberbullying, all that stuff is a real thing.
Entirely ruined.
Yeah, like, AI, I think, as great as it is, and I think it opens up a lot of doorways, especially when it comes to artistic expression and everything. I think it'll be a huge detriment because us as humans are too fallacious to have that level of responsibility and not abuse that.
Yeah, no, I'm on board with you. I love the idea of AI. I love everything about it. I love the creative aspects. I love that you're able to, like, chat GPT. Like, I love that you can talk to these AIs and put out a whole blog post. You know what I mean? That's incredible.
Yeah, you can write whole stories.
Yeah, you can do movie plot lines. You can make songs. There's all kinds of, things. And people are like, oh, what about my jobs? Adapt with the time, adapt.
And people forget some jobs are not meant to be forever. Like, there are industries that are dying industries, and there are industries that pop back up in their place, right? Like, particularly, and this is a weird one to discuss, but I was actually having this discussion with someone the other day, particularly when it comes to AI and sex robots, okay? So as we know, they're like a huge thing in the market right now. Lots of those incel boys love them. But they are actually a huge new wave of, like, technology and stuff, and, like, the amount of, like, in-depth, like, detail that they go into with these is crazy. Like, crazy. They even pay extra money for things like pubic hair and, like, to be as realistic as possible. And all these women are freaking out. Oh, well, it's going to kill our industry. It's going to kill our industry. Yeah, you know what? There's going to be a lot of industries that die from that. Because it's going to be $30 an hour with a very realistic sex robot in a room, and someone else comes in later and cleans it, or $300 with an actual living, breathing woman. When times get tough, what are guys going to pick? They're going to pick the one that's less yakety yak and, way cheaper.
Yeah.
And they're not going to feel anything about it, right?
Yeah, you're not wrong. I agree with you. I think, there's where there is a market, there's always going to be a demand. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
absolutely.
So, or I probably just said that backwards, but you get what I mean.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be, when there's a demand, there's always going to be a
There's a
market. There we
supply.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to something like that, like there's still always going to be men who are not interested in those things, men or women who are not interested in those things. So all of these people who are getting very concerned, there's still going to be other options.
Yeah.
Like
There's still, but
even like
honestly,
all
it's
these
gonna.
ones who are worried about losing their jobs. Like recently, one of my other, I'm a freelancer. I'm a freelance personal assistant, and one of my contracts that I work with, she recently let go of both of her blog post writers because she switched to AI. So there's an example of somebody losing their job to AI. However, all you have to do is switch it up. You still need somebody to write to the AI to tell it what to do. You know what I mean? So it's not like the loss of job is happening. It's just you need to change
It's
with the
evolving
time.
into something else. And sometimes it's not necessarily for, like it can be for the worse or it can be for the better. Sometimes, maybe our sex industry should die down a little bit. Maybe that would be good for women ultimately in the long term. Is that correct? Is that incorrect? I don't know. Only time tells.
I think that's fair.
But,
I think the hookup culture is starting to kind of,
and hookup
that may be going
culture.
with it.
Yeah, hookup, like, obviously in my one industry, it doesn't affect me there. Like, obviously it doesn't, because hookup culture does not touch what I do there. But hookup culture obviously is a huge part that you see in that, like where you're seeing only the top 10% of women who are doing really well actually maintain and do well, where all the other ones that were doing okay, they're starting to drop down. And you're seeing a lot actually just completely leave the industry.
Yeah.
Altogether. Like, it's, and so it's going to come down to, well, if you're actually really good at your job, you're going to maintain in that top 10% that are still keeping employment, that are still, because it's, like you said, it is supply and demand driven. If they have a high demand for those girls, they're going to be able to stay in business for as long as they want or until they age out.
Yeah, there's always going to be people who want human interaction over AI.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
just always going to be a thing.
Well, and eventually too, if we maybe get our shit together, I don't know, in the future, and we start, allowing, like, as you know, in Sweden, they have, like, they're mentally challenged or people in wheelchairs and stuff have a certain amount of money that they're allowed to spend on hookers and stuff like that, because even though they are confined into a wheelchair, they still have human needs. And normal hookup culture doesn't work or is not compatible with their life, right?
Yeah.
So, there will maybe be a need for those in the future. Who knows? We don't know yet, right? Time tells with our mindset and how we change and evolve and how we think. And I know I'm going to get shit on by so many dudes for saying that. Whatever. Screw you guys. I don't care. I'm allowed to get my opinion.
I want.
Yeah, I do what I want. So, yeah, I think the next couple years will really be interesting, especially when we see all this extreme, strict restriction on the internet. Like, I started out on the internet when it was like the Wild West of the internet. We didn't have restrictions. You were allowed to say whatever you wanted. I remember Yahoo chat rooms. Those were insane.
And the AOL chat rooms too. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Crazy.
We're not gonna. Yeah. I was too young.
Show our age here.
I was too young to be there, okay? That's all I'll say. Yeah.
Sorry.
A lot of dongs.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. The next few years are going to be very interesting. I think the next few years to a decade, we're going to see a lot of changes, both in restrictions, like the bill that you were chatting about, but also with the implementation of AI. I'm really interested because it's just taken right off. So I'm curious what's going to happen over the next, decade, and see where all of this takes us. And hopefully people start reading bills before they agree to
hopefully. Because unfortunately, this also means too that, like, for example, I could get restricted to what I say on the internet. Now, the CRTC is saying that this bill isn't going to affect like YouTubers, like the small people like that. But as we know, that can change like the wind, right?
Yeah.
One day it's okay, next day it's not. So I do worry that this bill could, even me sitting here talking right now, I could be restricted or, suddenly be cut from having a platform to speak on. I'm hoping it never comes to that. I'm hoping that the CRTC is like pretty neutral, and are pretty partisan on their politics and, are just about the Canadian economy and boosting that. But only time will tell on that.
Yeah.
If we start seeing people get shut down, then we're in trouble. But yeah, if we don't, then I guess it's all good. But at the same time too, let's I don't ever think that that it's ever going to turn out for the best. It never does with our government.
Yeah. No.
They started out with a little gun restriction. A little gun restriction turned into big gun restriction. So they lie all the time. Who knows?
Give them an inch, they take a mile every time.
All the time. And I don't understand why people... Like, I was looking at the voting stats for Trudeau, and what is with these boomer women fucking voting for him? Jesus fucking Christ.
He's an attractive young guy, of course.
Okay, you look at the numbers, and okay, I get a lot of young people voting NDP. That is just sort of the way that it goes. Young people vote NDP. They're young, all about the inspiration, and we're gonna do the best. And it's like... For the Liberals, you don't really see them get any high votes until you hit boomer women. All of a sudden, it was like 55+% of that population fucking voted for him. And then you look at the men's side, and it was just so heavily conservative. I'm like, wow, I bet that led to some awkward dinner table conversations.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh... And luckily we're seeing, I don't know, it's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing, but we are seeing more people in my age range vote conservative, which is kind of a little fucking weird, but I guess that happens with age. You get a little older, crankier.
Yeah.
Start wishing for the good old days. Not that I vote. I don't give a fuck because I'm choosing between a douche and a turd, so.
Yeah.
But yeah. I hope that maybe whoever comes in, if it's a conservative leader next time, this bill could always go away too, right?
Yeah.
So just because this bill is in play right now doesn't mean that the next leader who comes in won't get rid of it. Keep in mind the conservatives love their corporations, right?
Yeah.
They love peddling to corporations. So if this bill becomes too much of a hassle in the corporate basket, the conservative leader will just boot it right out. So I don't know. We'll see. But I don't think that the Personal Information and Tribunal Act should have been thrown in there. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It goes to make sure you're reading.
Yeah, read your bills, people. Like, don't support something just because it sounds good and just because some person on YouTube tells you it's good. Like, just because I'm telling you it's good doesn't mean that you shouldn't background check what I'm saying too, okay?
Yeah. Do your own research.
Yeah, do your own research.
Never trust anybody on the internet. Just do your own research.
Yeah, do your own research. I try to keep my research as, factual as possible. This is what came up with it. I recommend you guys read it for your own and see what you make of it. But the writing in it was pretty broad. So I guess we'll see what the CRTC decides to do with all this.
Yeah, definitely. Well, all right, Minxie, I think we're going to wrap up this episode. This was awesome. Sure. We vibe great. I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again. And until next time.
Yeah, for sure. Peace, everyone.